Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking on something pretty huge. We're trying to map the absolute.
That's a big mission.
It really is. We're not just, running through ancient history. We're diving deep into how Greek philosophy actually defined reality, defined knowledge itself.
Yeah, and our sources give us this amazing path to follow. It traces this whole evolution of the highest ideas. You see it starting with Plato's forms.
Those eternal ideas.
Right, and then moving through Aristotle, really trying to pin down the notion, making it concrete. Then you get this turn inwards.
The Hellenistic schools, Stoics, Epicureans, focused on the self, on certainty.
Exactly, and it all kind of culminates in this big spiritual synthesis with the Neoplatonists.
So we're looking at how the world's spirit, as the source puts it, unfolds, moving from out there, the objective, to in here, subjective certainty.
And then trying to bring it all together in the spiritual. It's fundamentally about this core tension, isn't it? Between pure thought, the abstract notion, and, well, the world we actually experience, phenomenal reality.
And for you listening, the goal is really to pull out those critical insights, the key arguments, the philosophical moves that show how these thinkers, even centuries apart, were constantly responding to each other.
Yeah, we need to see how they built on things, or sometimes how they had to make a really radical break from what came before. It's a conversation across time.
Exactly. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Okay, Plato. First off, the sources really convey this sense of, awe about how he viewed philosophy. It wasn't just a subject for him.
No, absolutely not. It was total conviction. He calls it man's highest possible possession and true reality. That's strong language.
It really is. It speaks to this incredible enthusiasm he had, this deep belief that human reason could actually connect with, almost merge with, the divine.
Yeah, this unity of consciousness and reality, true knowledge. For Plato, that was it. That was superior to everything else. It's not just picking a favorite subject. It's like a zealous declaration that this is the only path to what's truly real.
But that very intensity, that reverence, actually creates a hurdle for us now, trying to understand his system, right? We constantly have to separate his actual philosophic idea, the speculative thought,
from what he uses to explain it, the ordinary conception, as the sources call it, like the myths, the pictures he paints.
And getting that distinction wrong seems like the easiest way to misread Plato entirely.
It's probably the most critical point. Because the idea, the notion in the philosophical sense, it isn't like a thing you can just pass around or sum up easily.
You can't keep it in your pockets, as the saying goes.
Exactly. It's not an object you possess. It's more like the essence that possesses you, the thinker. It's this internal animating structure.
Can you give us an example from the text? How does this play out, like when he talks about creation?
Sure. The Timaeus is the classic case. When Plato uses that narrative style, saying God created the world, or he talks about the demiurge.
The craftsman god.
Right. That's the presentation. It's the story, the picture he's using to make a really abstract concept, maybe a bit more accessible, maybe to ease people into a controversial idea.
So taking the demiurge literally as a specific being out there.
That would be missing the point entirely. You'd be stuck on the presentation, the ordinary conception, and you'd fail to grasp the speculative idea underneath. The idea is about the eternal structure of perfection. The myth is just kind of a window onto how it works.
So the myth is like the scaffolding.
Yeah.
But the real philosophical structure is the idea itself, the logic of the universal.
That's a good way to put it.
And if we miss that, we also miss how incredibly deep his thinking was about the subjective side of knowledge, especially that really radical theory in the Meno knowledge is recollection.
Anamnesis. Yes. This is where Plato just completely breaks from how most people thought about learning then, and frankly, how many still do.
The common idea being the mind as a tabula rasa, a blank slate.
Exactly. Waiting for sense data, external stuff, foreign particles to write on it.
And Plato says, no, that's impossible. Learning can't be about just absorbing something foreign, because the mind itself has to be self-sufficient, independent.
Precisely. He argues that what we call learning is actually recollection. It's making actual what's already inherent in the mind's essence. The soul, before it was embodied, already knew the eternal ideas. Learning is just jogging the memory.
Stimulating the recognition of what's already inside.
Yes.
Bringing it out.
What's the deeper philosophical punch here? Why is this idea of learning so important?
Because it defines the mind itself as subjectivity. Its fundamental nature is to be, as the source says, eternally remaining at home with itself.
It doesn't need outside stuff to be what it is.
Right. If the mind is the absolute species, its whole process is about returning into itself. Nothing essential can be truly foreign to it. confusion, sense experience, those are just triggers, stimuli, to make the soul turn away from the messy, changing world.
And look towards the permanent, eternal world of being, the ideas.
Exactly. It's a turning inward and upward. And that inherent movement from confusion back to self-awareness, that sounds like it connects directly to the Platonic dialectic.
It does.
Because when we talk about dialectic in Plato, it's not just arguing, is it? It's something much more structured.
Oh, much more. True dialectic is the necessary internal movement of pure notions, pure concepts. And these concepts aren't static. They're alive. They don't just dissolve into nothing like opinions do, but they also don't become rigid, dead dogma.
They have their own life, their own necessary progression.
Yes. A self-propelling movement.
Which leads us then to what makes Plato such a pivotal figure, his full articulation of the idea.
This is his epoch-making contribution, absolutely. He establishes the universal thought itself as the only true reality. Everything else, the world we sense, is just changing, fleeting, secondary.
So he elevates the idea from just a concept to the actual substance of reality.
And crucially, he gives it more definition. It's not just a static being there. The universal is the active end, the purpose, the final cause that rules over and penetrates all the particular things, producing the variety we see.
The world is striving towards the perfection of the ideas.
That's the core of it. The ideas are the goals.
So this objective world of ideas is the bedrock. But even with Plato, you can see the next challenge starting to form, can't you? Because sometimes, especially in the Timaeus again, he still talks about the highest idea, God, almost like it's separate from the world.
That pictorial representation creeps back in.
Yeah. And that separation leaves a question hanging. How does the universal idea actually become fully concrete, fully realized in the world?
That's the perfect transition, because that's exactly the problem Aristotle picks up.
Yeah.
Yes, moving from that somewhat abstract universal to what we could call the concrete notion, that's Aristotle's project. And his style is so different, isn't it?
Completely. Plato uses dialogues, avoids laying down final doctrines.
He's more suggestive, dramatic. Aristotle is systematic, incredibly detailed. He wants to examine every single aspect of a thing to get a fixed, solid definition. He's not afraid to get into the weeds.
He seems almost empirical sometimes, looking at biology, rhetoric, everything. But the sources say this always leads back to speculation.
Always. He's synthesizing. He takes the essence he finds already present in perception, in the details, and uses that to build up to the highest speculative notion. He's really formalizing the tension Plato was wrestling with.
And maybe his greatest achievement here was formalizing these two key categories, potentiality and actuality.
Dynamis and energia, absolutely fundamental. This framework is what lets him define becoming, that transition from matter to form, with such precision.
Okay, let's unpack that tension. What exactly is potentiality dynamis?
It's the implicit state, the beginning point. The abstract universal possibility. Think of a chunk of marble.
Its potentiality is to become a statue.
Right. But it's not just random, undetermined possibility. It's not brute force. It's the matter that already holds the specific capacity to take on that form. It's what something can become before it actually does.
And actuality, energia, or entelechy, that's the realization.
Yes. Actuality is pure activity. It's the form realized. It's the end achieved. Aristotle's point is that true substance can't just be matter, because matter is only potentiality. It's defined by what it lacks.
So truth has to lie in the realization, the activity.
Exactly. The entelechy having its end within itself. That's true substance.
So the ultimate reality, the absolute, has to somehow unite both potentiality and actuality. They can't be separate.
They absolutely must be unified. If the absolute were only potentiality, it would just sit there, inert. If it were only actuality, it would be static, unchanging, with no internal dynamism, no process.
So the notion, to be truly concrete, has to have that activity within itself.
Just like the true subject, the thinker has to contain the potentiality within their thought. It's a dynamic unity, a process, not a fixed state.
And this leads him straight to defining the absolute as thought of thought, noesis, noesis.
Yeah.
Let's slow down here. Why does the ultimate reality have to be thought thinking about itself?
Okay, well, think about it. Absolute being has to be the thing that causes movement without itself being moved by anything else.
The unmoved mover.
Right. It has to be the idea that stays identical to itself even while it's generating change. It's like a perfect circle of reason returning into itself. Now, what moves our desire or our thought?
The object we desire or think about. The good, the beautiful, maybe.
Exactly. So what's the highest, most necessary, ultimate object of thought?
It would have to be thought itself.
Precisely. If the absolute depended on anything external to define it or move it, it wouldn't be absolute. So the first cause must be purely self-contained, purely self-contemplating.
The principle of knowing, principium cognoscendi, is identical to the principle of being, principium essendi.
Yes. That identity, that pure self-reflection is what makes it absolute. Thought is only moved by the object of thought, and the ultimate object is thought.
And he takes this concept of the notion and applies it to psychology too, right? His model of the soul.
He does. He defines this hierarchy. The nutrient soul, basic life, plants. The sensitive soul, animals, perception, movement. And the intelligent soul, humans, thought.
And the key is how they relate.
Yes, they aren't separate boxes. They're degrees of potentiality. The lower level, the more universal function like nutrition, is inherent in the higher level like sensation. The nutrient soul is the necessary basis for the sensitive soul.
And the intelligent soul, thinking, nous, he calls that pure actuality, separable from the body.
Pure actuality, absolute activity. And this is where we hit that really common misunderstanding of Aristotle. He says the thinking part of the soul is nothing in reality before it thinks.
Meaning it only exists when it's active, when it's doing thinking.
Exactly. It's pure energy, pure energy. And this is the context for that infamous phrase about the mind being like an unwritten tablet, the tabula rasa.
Which everyone takes to mean blank slate.
And it's been interpreted that way for centuries, making Aristotle sound like a simple empiricist just waiting for sensory input.
But that completely contradicts his own definition of the soul as actuality.
Totally contradicts it. He means the opposite of passive reception. The soul potentially contains all things, all forms, but it only have actual content when it's actively thinking, when the notion is being realized, actualized.
So it's not an empty box being filled, it's a capacity being switched on.
That's a much better way to think about it. It's the potential being activated. And this standpoint, where the objective form and the subjective act of thinking are perfectly unified in the activity of thought itself, that's really the pinnacle of classical Greek philosophy's attempt to grasp the absolute objectively.
Okay, so Aristotle achieves this incredible synthesis. But philosophy doesn't just stop there, does it? It takes this sharp turn.
A really radical turn. The era of these grand objective systems, Plato's ideas out there, Aristotle's notion embedded in reality, it kind of gives way.
To a search for subjective wisdom.
Exactly. The focus shifts inward. Think about the historical context. The Greek city-states are losing their independence. The world feels less stable, more chaotic.
So philosophy turns from defining the universe to defining what? The wise person. How to live.
Precisely. How to find personal certainty, a reliable criterion for truth within oneself when the external world seems unreliable. This kicks off the age of dogmatism schools trying to ground truth in some single, maybe one-sided principle.
Like pure reason or pure sensation.
The two extremes, which brings us to the Stoics and the Epicureans.
Right. Let's start with the Stoics. They kind of formalized the earlier Cynic idea of living simply, naturally, but they did it with this framework of universal reason, the logos.
They did. Their whole system starts with physics, and it's fundamentally pantheistic. God isn't separate. God is everything, the rational order, the substance, the activity that runs through all existence.
Like Heraclitus' fire.
Very much drawing on that. Fire is the active principle. And God, nature, fate, hymermenon, necessity, reason, divine foresight for the Stoics, these are all basically different names for the same thing, the rational structure of the cosmos.
So the universe has this absolute rational order, and the individual's job is just to align with it.
To live in accordance with nature, which means living in accordance with reason, the logos.
Okay, but how does this Stoic wise man know he's aligned? What's their test, their criterion of truth?
The criterion is this harmony between your thought and reality, and it's expressed as the approbation of consciousness. It's like a spontaneous yes. An assent, your ruling faculty, your reason, gives to a certain kind of sensory impression.
What kind?
One that's clear, distinct, forceful, a cataleptic impression, they called it. It seems to grasp the object so clearly it compels assent. Your ruling thought basically declares, yes, this perception matches reality. The power of truth is located entirely in that internal subjective nod of approval.
That sounds, well, it sounds kind of reasonable. So where's the weakness? If the universal law is just right reason, why do people criticize Stoicism for being, empty or abstract?
The problem is they could assert this unity of thought and reality, this compelled assent, but they couldn't really prove it rigorously, speculatively. Their big concepts of virtue, living according to nature, they remain pretty abstract, hard to pin down in specific situations.
How do you get from live according to reason to should I do X or Y right now?
Exactly. That gap was hard to bridge logically. And to fill it, they often fell back on this idea of external teleology, divine foresight. They justify things, even superstitions sometimes, by saying, well, Providence must have intended it.
Which seems to undermine their own appeal to pure reason, doesn't it?
It does create an inconsistency. It makes their universal feel a bit hollow at times.
Okay, now let's flip to the other side, the Epicureans. If Stoics grounded truth in inner reason,
Epicureans grounded it in the exact opposite, immediate, particular sensation.
right, taking the old Cyrenaic idea that happiness is the goal.
And building a system around it. For Epicurus, if truth is just what immediately exists for your senses, then you don't really need those big abstract notions of Plato or Aristotle. It's all about direct experience.
And the goal isn't just raw pleasure, despite the popular image. It's ataraxia.
Undisturbed tranquility, peace of mind. And crucially, this wasn't achieved by just indulging every whim. It required rational calculation.
Ah, so thought comes back in, but only as a tool.
Exactly. You use reason instrumentally to weigh the immediate pleasure against potential future pain, to figure out how to achieve lasting tranquility and independence from fortune or chance. It's a kind of cultured hedonism.
And their criterion of truth, the canon, reflects this focus on sensation.
Absolutely. It's quite interesting. It has three parts, or moments. First is sensuous perception itself.
And that's infallible.
For Epicurus, yes. The act of perceiving is true. You might misinterpret what you perceive, but the raw sensation itself cannot be wrong. It's beyond criticism because it's immediate.
Okay, what's the second moment?
The ordinary conception, or prolepsis. This is basically a general image formed from repeated perceptions. You see lots of dogs, you form the ordinary conception dog.
Like an empirical generalization, a memory trace.
Exactly. A stable image built from repeated sensations, but still totally grounded in sensation.
And the third part, the one that actually judges truth.
That's opinion doxa. This is where you test a current conception or idea against your immediate perception. Is the thing in front of me now consistent with my stored ordinary conception?
So if I see something furry with 4 legs and it barks, and that matches my prolepsis of dog, my opinion, that is a dog, is true.
According to the canon, yes. But notice how limited this is. It doesn't analyze the essence of the dog or its place in a larger rational order. It just checks for consistency with past sense experience.
So immediate perception always wins.
It's the ultimate authority. Even if it leads to contradictions down the line, the sensation itself is taken as true. It's a radically different approach to certainty than the Stoics.
Right, so you have these two major schools, Stoicism and Epicureanism, both claiming they found the key to certainty. One says it's inner reason, the other says it's outer sensation. But this kind of dogmatic confidence, it couldn't really last, could it?
No, it practically invited critique. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened next with the New Academy and then full-blown skepticism. This is where philosophy really confronts that fundamental gap between our ideas and the world, between ideality and reality.
The problem that still plagues philosophy today in many ways.
Absolutely. It arguably starts right here. Arcesilaus, heading the New Academy, launched the first major attack, specifically targeting the Stoic criterion.
Their idea of approbation that compelled assent.
Exactly. Arcesilaus argued, look, you say this feeling of certainty guarantees truth, but you haven't actually proved that connection logically. It's just an assertion.
And he pointed out the core issue. Sensory images are particular individual things. Pure thought deals with universals. How can something universal just automatically assent to something particular and foreign to it?
Right. If the two realms, subjective thought and objective content, are fundamentally different, how do they just click together like the Stoics claimed? The conclusion Arcesilaus drew was devastating. Nothing can be truly known, a kathalepta, incomprehensible.
He showed that the Stoic criterion wasn't reliable because even a fool could have that feeling of assent about a false impression. So it couldn't distinguish truth from falsehood.
Precisely. He effectively pulled the rug out from under Stoic epistemology. If absolute knowledge is off the table, what's left?
Well, that's where Carnes comes in, right? He shifts the goalposts.
A very pragmatic shift. Carnes basically says, okay, Maybe we can't have absolute truth, but we still have to live. We have to make decisions. So instead of certainty, let's look for convincing probabilities for the conduct of life.
A practical standard, not a metaphysical one.
Exactly. And he developed this really quite sophisticated 3-level system for judging these probabilities. The lowest level is the convincing conception, Pithani.
This is just what seems true on the surface. Obvious repeats itself.
Yeah, the first impression that strikes you as plausible, like you see a rope in the dark. The Pithani conception might be snake. It's convincing at first glance.
But not very reliable. So the next level.
The secure conception, epeiraspatos. This requires more. The conception has to be convincing and consistent with all the surrounding circumstances. It shouldn't be contradicted by anything else you observe.
Like checking the snake with a flashlight and seeing it's actually a rope. The surrounding circumstances, light reveals texture, contradict the initial impression.
Exactly. Or think of a doctor diagnosing an illness. One symptom isn't enough. You need all the symptoms to point consistently in the same direction. Fever, cough, chest pain, all harmonizing. That makes the diagnosis more secure, less likely to be overturned.
Okay, and the highest level of probability.
That's the developed conception, Diaxidunio. This is the most rigorous. Here, you don't just check for consistency. You actively investigate each relevant circumstance on its own merits. You cross-examine the evidence.
Like in a trial, checking each witness's story individually, looking for internal consistency and external corroboration.
That's a great analogy. You test every part of the hypothesis. Carneades rightly saw that this deep analysis provides the most trustworthy basis for action, even if it's still probability, not absolute certainty. He puts immediate, simple conviction at the bottom, where it belongs.
This whole trend of dismantling certainty reaches its peak with the formal skeptics, particularly Sextus Empiricus, who documented their methods.
Yes, the famous skeptical tropes or modes. And it's important to remember their goal wasn't just intellectual demolition, it was therapeutic.
To achieve epic suspension of judgment.
Exactly. By showing that for every argument there's an equally strong counter-argument, they hope to cancel out belief. And if you suspend belief, you achieve ataraxia freedom from mental turmoil, inner peace.
So the tropes were tools to achieve that peace. Let's look at the 5 key logical modes Sextus identified, because they really get at the flaws in how we try to establish certainty.
They're incredibly insightful about the limits of ordinary understanding. The first one is simple, difference of opinion.
Just the basic fact that people disagree about everything important?
Everything sophisticated, yes. Philosophers disagree, cultures disagree, individuals disagree with themselves over time. Since there's endless, irresolvable contradiction, you have to suspend judgment.
Okay, the second, infinite progression.
This targets proof. Any reason you give to support a claim needs its own reason, its own proof.
And that reason needs a reason.
And so on, forever. You never reach a solid foundation. Deduction based on prior grounds just pushes the problem back infinitely.
So to stop that infinite regress, people often use the third mode, hypothesis or a presupposition.
Right. You just decide to stop somewhere. You say, okay, this is my starting point. I'm just assuming it's true.
But that's arbitrary, isn't it? It's not proof.
It's taking something on faith or by fiat. It stops the regress, but sacrifices any claim to logically grounded certainty.
The fourth mode is reciprocity or circular proof.
This is when you try to prove A using B, but then you turn around and prove B using A.
Like defining heavy by tendency to fall downwards and downwards by the direction heavy things fall.
Exactly. Neither point is independently grounded. They just lean on each other in a circle. No real proof is offered.
And the fifth, maybe the most fundamentally skeptical mode, relativity.
This is the killer app, in a way. It argues that everything we perceive or conceive exists only in relation to something else.
To the person perceiving, to other objects, to the conditions of perception?
To everything. Nothing is known in itself, absolutely. Any statement like, this is X, really just means this appears X relative to Y under condition Z. It shows that what we take as definite is actually defined by its relation to other things, often its opposite.
It dissolves the solidity of things into relationships, into appearances.
It reveals the nullity, the emptiness of purely sensuous certainty. And ultimately, it pushes consciousness into this abyss where all external objectivity, whether sensory or even the Platonic ideas, seems to collapse. All that's left is the thinking self, isolated.
Okay, so skepticism leads us to this abyss. Self-consciousness seems to have undermined any solid ground for knowing reality. That feels like a dead end.
It feels like it, but it couldn't be the final word for philosophy. The mind, having turned inward and found only relativity and contradiction, had to find a way back to the objective. But not the old objectivity of Plato's separate ideas.
It had to be a different kind of objectivity.
An intellectual objectivity, a spiritual world. And this is where Neoplatonism, especially through Plotinus, comes in as this incredible moment of synthesis.
The third great wave of Greek thought, as the sources frame it.
Right. It's recognizing that the split between the subjective, certainty, the self, and the objective, the world, the idea, can only truly be healed in a spiritual realm. After critiquing the objective and deconstructing the subjective, the mind tries to generate a unified world that is fundamentally spiritual, even in its outward appearance.
And Plotinus tries to grasp the absolute itself as this concrete, self-determining thought, which leads to the Neoplatonic Trinity, the three principles or hypostases. Where does it start?
It starts with the one to hen. This is the ultimate source, the first principle. But it's almost beyond description. It's inexpressible, unknowable in the ordinary sense.
Pure abstract unity, before even activity or consciousness.
Exactly. It's super essential beyond being itself. We can mostly only say what it isn't. Yet paradoxically, this absolute self-sufficient simplicity must express itself. It's an inner necessity for perfection to overflow.
And the first thing that flows out or emanates from the one.
That is the nous, usually translated as intellect or understanding. This is the first product, sometimes called the sun. It's the one finding itself, becoming aware of itself.
So the nous is conscious.
Yes, it exists as pure duality. It is both the thinking subject and its object, and that object is the eternal contemplation of the one. The nous contains within itself the entire intelligible world, all the Platonic ideas.
Ah, so it's like Aristotle's thought-thinking thought, but now explicitly defined as the direct, eternal result of the absolute one contemplating itself.
Precisely. The ideas are now securely located within the divine intellect.
Okay, so we have the one, then the nous. What's the third principle?
The soul. Psycho. The soul acts as the mediator. It flows from the nous, much like the nous flows from the one. Its role is to transmit the life and order of the intelligible world, the nous, down into the changing, temporal, physical world.
It animates the universe. It's the life principle.
It is the life of the universe, yes. It bridges the gap between the eternal perfection of the nous and the multiplicity and change of the phenomenal world we experience.
Well, let's talk about that process emanation. Use that word. How is that different from, say, creation?
That's a crucial distinction. Emanation isn't like a craftsman making something separate from himself. It's more like light radiating from the sun.
It's a necessary outflowing, not an act of will.
Exactly. It's a necessary self-disclosure that happens because of the very nature of the one's perfection. And importantly, this outflowing doesn't diminish the source. The one remains perfectly full, unchanged, just as the sun isn't lessened by shining.
It's a logical necessity of perfection expressing itself.
Yes, a continuous, non-diminishing overflow. Later Neoplatonists like Proclus would elaborate this into incredibly complex hierarchies, triads within triads, detailing the stages of emanation.
But the core idea remains the same.
The core insight holds. The ultimate result is that the world of thought, the intelligible realm, has become the primary reality. The purely sensuous world, the world of mere appearance that bothered the skeptics so much, has kind of faded in importance. It's seen as the furthest, dimmest reflection of the true spiritual reality.
So what's left is essentially God the One, nous soul complex, and its life manifesting throughout existence.
That's the grand vision. It represents the culmination of this whole Greek philosophical journey. It's the final, profound recognition that the absolute is fundamentally self-consciousness.
Thought making itself its own object, sustaining itself, and returning to itself through this process of emanation and contemplation.
Yes, it's spirit. This concrete, self-determining thought finally resolves that ancient tension between Plato's objective idea out there and the subjective certainty the Hellenistic schools were searching for in here.
By placing the ideas firmly inside the divine mind, as its necessary self-contemplation.
Plotinus offers this powerful spiritual synthesis that brings the whole trajectory to a kind of completion within the ancient world. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey we just took. We've really covered a massive sweep of intellectual history today.
Nearly 1,000 years of intense philosophical effort.
We started way back with Plato, establishing that the universal, the idea, was the true, eternal reality existing objectively. Then we moved to Aristotle, who tried to bring that down to earth, formalizing the notion through dynamis and energia.
Potentiality and actuality. defining the absolute as that pure, self-thinking thought, the peak of objective idealism in a way.
But then that objective framework started to fracture. Philosophy turned inward, didn't it? We saw the Stoics desperately seeking certainty through that inner feeling of rational assent.
And the Epicureans placing all their bets on the immediate, undeniable authority of sensation. Two different paths to subjective certainty.
Paths that were ultimately shown to be dead ends by the relentless critique of the New Academy and the skeptics. They used logic itself to demonstrate the seeming impossibility of achieving absolute knowledge through either reason or the senses.
Leaving consciousness in that kind of skeptical abyss where everything objective had dissolved.
Until finally, out of that very abyss, Neoplatonism emerged with this profound grand synthesis, reestablishing the absolute, but now as spirit, realizing itself through that necessary flow, the one, the nous, the soul.
Uniting the subjective and the objective within a fundamentally intellectual, spiritual reality.
It's easy listening to all this, the idea, entelechy, epicy, news, to think of them as just dry, academic terms from the past.
Very easy. But the sources really push back against that. They insist these aren't just abstractions, they are the deeds of the world spirit. They represent the essential underlying structures, the permanent forces that shape reality itself.
So when these philosophers were wrestling with how to define truth or reality or the notion, they were dealing with the most fundamental building blocks of existence.
That's the claim. They were trying to map the absolute.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, something to reflect on. If we take seriously this long tradition's core argument that what is ultimately real is rational, enduring, the notion, then maybe we should ask ourselves,
what parts of our own experienced reality, the things we believe, the certainties we hold, the way we make decisions, what parts are merely phenomenal, fleeting appearances based on contradiction, or maybe just unexamined assumptions?
And what parts, if any, truly align with something more enduring, something akin to that determined, rational notion these thinkers spent centuries trying to grasp?
Where do you stand in this ongoing quest for the absolute? That's something worth pondering.